Journey to the River of Fire. The sky over Eldara was the color of dying embers, ashen gray streaked with a faint, sorrowful red that never seemed to fade. The villagers often said that the heavens wept for something ancient buried beneath the mountains. To most, it was just a saying passed down from frightened ancestors. But to 16-year-old Kael, it was a whisper, an echo that stirred something deep within him every time the wind blew across the scorched plains. Kael lived in the shadow of Mount Vareth, a sleeping giant whose dark slopes rose high above the village like a god turned to stone. His mother, Mira, had always warned him never to wander too far beyond the boundaries marked by the black stones. "The world beyond is cursed," she'd say, her eyes flickering with fear. "There are rivers there that burn instead of flow. They say it's where the gods buried their wrath." But Kael never believed in old tales, not until the day he saw the fire move. It was dawn when it happened. He was out by the western ridge gathering herbs for the healer, old Master Rin, when he felt the ground tremble beneath his boots. The air grew heavy, thick with heat that shimmered across the horizon. Then, far in the distance, he saw it, a line of red snaking through the valley like molten veins beneath the earth. It wasn't lightning. It wasn't the setting sun. It was a river, alive, glowing, pulsing like the heart of the world itself. Kael stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. Every story he'd heard as a child crashed through his mind at once. The river of fire, the forbidden current said to devour souls, the path only the chosen could walk. And somewhere in that blazing vision, he thought he saw something move, a figure, cloaked and silent, standing at the river's edge. He ran back to the village, his mind a storm of disbelief and terror. But when he told the elders, they dismissed him with uneasy glances. "You've seen the reflection of the sun, boy," said Elder Tarn, his voice brittle. "There is no river of fire. That's just the old world's lie." Yet that night, Kael couldn't sleep. The whisper in the wind returned, faint, but undeniable. It called his name, not once, but 3 times. "Kael, Kael, come." He bolted upright, sweat glistening on his brow. The sound wasn't in his head. It came from outside, from beyond the window where the plains stretched endlessly toward the horizon. He stepped out, barefoot, the cool earth grounding his fear. The village was silent except for the crackle of torches. But the whisper guided him toward the ridge again, toward the forbidden lands. That was when he saw the stranger, a figure cloaked in black, standing just beyond the boundary stones. The stranger's face was hidden by a hood, but Kael could feel the weight of their gaze. "You saw it too," the stranger said in a voice that sounded like smoke curling through fire. "The river burns again." Kael's heart pounded. "Who are you?" "Someone who once walked its edge, and lived to regret it." The stranger lowered the hood, revealing a woman with eyes like molten gold and skin marked with faint, glowing lines that pulsed like lava veins beneath her flesh. "My name is Saris. I come from beyond the mountains, from a land swallowed by flame. The river has awakened, and with it, something ancient stirs beneath the world. You are not safe here, Kael." "How do you know my name?" he demanded. She tilted her head slightly. "Because the fire has chosen you." Before Kael could speak again, the ground shuddered violently. A deep roar echoed through the valley, like a beast awakening from centuries of slumber. The wind carried ash and the acrid scent of burning earth. Flames licked the distant horizon. "The river is rising," Saris whispered. "And it's hungry." Kael turned to run, but Saris grabbed his arm, her touch scorching his skin. "You must listen," she hissed. "The river of fire is not just a curse, it's a gateway. If it reaches Eldara, your village will burn. But if you reach its source before the 3rd dawn, you can stop it." "Stop it? How?" "I'm not just a boy," she interrupted, her voice fierce. "You are the descendant of those who sealed the fire long ago. It runs in your blood, Kael. That's why it calls to you." Kael stared at her, his mind spinning. The air around them crackled as another tremor shook the ground. In the distance, a tower of red light burst upward, splitting the clouds apart. Saris looked toward the mountain with fear in her eyes. We have little time. The river's heart lies beyond Mount Vareth. If we don't reach it before sunrise, everything you know will turn to ash. Kael hesitated, torn between the life he knew and the fire calling his name. But when he turned toward his village, he saw flames already flickering along the outskirts, small, hungry tongues of fire that devoured everything they touched. His choice was made. He looked at Saris and nodded. Then we go now. Saris smiled faintly, her molten eyes glinting. Good. But remember, once you cross the ridge, there's no turning back. The river tests all who walk its path. It will try to consume your fear, your hope, even your soul. Kael swallowed hard and glanced one last time at Eldara, the only home he'd ever known. Then, with fire on the horizon and the whisper still echoing in his ears, he stepped past the black stones. The air grew hotter, thicker. The stars above seemed to dim, as if retreating from the light below. The journey to the river of fire had begun. And somewhere in the darkness, a low, guttural laugh echoed through the earth, a sound that promised both doom and destiny. The world beyond the black stones was unlike anything Kael had ever seen. The soil was dark and cracked, still warm beneath his boots, and the air shimmered with heat that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Each step he took felt heavier than the last, as though the land itself tried to pull him back. The moon above was veiled by a thin red haze, and the stars were dim and distant, watching, but silent. Saris moved ahead with quiet grace, her cloak trailing faint sparks that faded as they touched the ground. She carried no torch, yet her golden eyes glowed faintly, casting strange shadows on the path. Kael followed, clutching a small satchel and the dagger his mother had given him when he was 10. A useless weapon, he realized now, against rivers of flame. How far is it to the river? Kael asked after what felt like hours of walking. His throat was dry. Every breath burned slightly. Farther than your heart is ready for, Saris said without turning. The river guards itself with illusions, traps, and the remnants of what it destroyed long ago. We must pass through the Veil of Cinders before dawn. Veil of Cinders? Kael repeated. That sounds inviting. A faint smirk tugged at her lips. It isn't. They climbed a steep ridge where the earth split open in long fissures glowing faintly from within. Sulfur filled the air, stinging Kael's eyes. He tried not to look down into the cracks where molten light pulsed like a heartbeat, but curiosity betrayed him. Beneath the surface, something seemed to move, shadows writhing in the glow, as if alive. Don't look too long, Saris warned. The fire remembers faces. If it knows you, it will follow. Kael tore his gaze away, shivering despite the heat. What is it? Saris hesitated. The river is not water, nor simple fire. It is the blood of the world, a remnant of the gods' war. When they tore each other apart, their power seeped into the earth, becoming this burning current. It sleeps most centuries until it's called again. Called? By who? She stopped walking. The wind moaned softly, carrying ash through the air. By someone who seeks its power, she said grimly. Or by something that wants to wake it. Kael frowned. And you think it's waking now because of me? I think it's calling you, she said, her eyes locking on his. There's a difference. They continued in silence for a while, the only sound the distant rumble of molten earth shifting beneath their feet. Kael's mind swirled with questions, but every one of them led to fear. He didn't understand why the river would call to him. He was just a boy, a farmer's son. He'd never done anything that could possibly matter to ancient gods or dying flames. Eventually, they reached the edge of a canyon so wide Kael couldn't see the other side. The ground ended abruptly, crumbling into an abyss filled with slow-moving lava flows far below. The air shimmered with heat, and the faint sound of hissing echoed upward like a living breath. Saris stopped at the cliff's edge. We're close to the Veil of Cinders. We must descend before dawn. Kael peered over the side. There's no way down. There is. She pointed to a narrow series of rocks jutting out from the canyon wall, forming a perilous trail downward. Follow my steps exactly. One wrong move, and you'll join the fire below. Kael swallowed hard but nodded. They began their descent in silence. The stone was slick with ash, and the air was thick and hot enough to make him dizzy. Once his foot slipped, sending a few pebbles tumbling into the glowing abyss. The sound of them hissing in the molten flow made his heart pound. At last, they reached the canyon floor. It was a barren wasteland of cracked black stone and drifting ash clouds that glowed faintly from below. In the distance, faint orange lights danced like will-o'-the-wisps, flickering through the haze. "What are those?" Kael asked, pointing. "Remnants," Saris said softly. "Echoes of the souls who were consumed by the river. They wander here, trapped between fire and shadow. Don't let them see you." But it was already too late. One of the flickering lights broke away from the others and drifted toward them. As it came closer, it began to take shape, a human figure, translucent and burning from within. Its eyes were hollow, its mouth open in a silent scream. Kael froze. Saris drew a curved blade from her belt, the metal glowing faintly blue. "Stay behind me," she said sharply. The spirit let out a shrill, haunting cry that echoed through the canyon. The ground trembled in response, and suddenly, dozens of other lights began to rise from the cracks in the earth. They moved slowly, surrounding Kael and Saris like a ring of ghostly fire. "What do we do?" Kael whispered. Saris took a step forward. "They crave warmth, but they hate light. Cover your eyes." Kael did as told. A second later, he heard a low hum and felt a burst of heat unlike anything before. Even through closed eyes, a blinding white light flashed across the canyon. The shrieking stopped. When he looked again, the spirits were gone. Nothing left but drifting ash. Saris sheathed her blade, breathing heavily. "We can't linger here. The veil remembers every life it takes. The longer we stay, the stronger it becomes." They hurried onward, weaving through stone pillars and geysers of molten air that hissed and spat from the ground. Kael's heart pounded in his chest, but he couldn't help glancing at Saris. There was something strange about her. The way the light bent slightly around her, the faint pattern of glowing veins that pulsed beneath her skin. Finally, when they reached a small plateau, he asked the question burning in his mind. "What are you, Saris? You said you came from beyond the mountains, but you don't look like anyone I've ever seen." She didn't answer right away. The silence stretched until Kael thought she might ignore him completely. Then she said quietly, "I was born of fire. My people once served the river. We were its guardians until we disobeyed it. The punishment was eternal flame in our veins." Kael stared at her, stunned. "You mean you're not human, not anymore," she finished for him, her voice heavy with sorrow. "That's why I know what it can do. The river doesn't forgive. It only burns." Kael wanted to ask more, but a sudden sound cut through the air, a deep, guttural growl that seemed to come from beneath the earth itself. The ground shook violently, and cracks split open all around them. Saris grabbed his arm and pulled him back just as a massive creature burst from the ground, its body made of molten rock, its eyes burning like twin furnaces. The beast roared, shaking the entire valley. Kael stumbled backward, staring in horror. "What is that?" Saris drew her sword, her eyes glowing brighter. "A sentinel," she said through gritted teeth. "One of the river's protectors. It knows we're coming." The creature reared back, molten saliva dripping from its jaws, and lunged toward them. Kael barely had time to react as Saris shouted, "Run!" They sprinted across the plateau, the monster's footsteps shaking the ground behind them. Lava burst from cracks, lighting the path with deadly brilliance. Kael's lungs burned, his heart pounding with terror and adrenaline. Saris turned mid-run and slashed her sword in a wide arc. A wave of blue fire erupted from the blade, colliding with the beast's molten body. It screamed, a sound like grinding metal, and staggered back, but it wasn't defeated. "Keep running," she yelled. As they reached the far end of the plateau, Kael saw a narrow tunnel ahead, a dark passage leading deeper underground. Without hesitation, they dove inside just as the sentinel's massive claws slammed down where they had stood. The entrance collapsed, sealing them inside. For a moment, there was only silence and the echo of their ragged breaths. The tunnel was narrow and pitch black, save for the faint glow of Ceres's eyes. Kael leaned against the wall, gasping. That thing was guarding the river? Ceres nodded slowly.
Yes.
And if it's awake, then the river's heart is stirring faster than I feared. Kael looked down the dark tunnel, where faint heat waves shimmered ahead. Then we go deeper. Ceres glanced at him with a mixture of pride and warning. You're learning fast, Kael. But deeper means closer to the truth, and the truth burns worse than fire. And as they moved into the depths of the earth, the whisper returned, fainter this time, but more urgent, more alive. Kael, find me before the dawn, or all will burn. He didn't know who or what was speaking, but he knew one thing for certain. There was no turning back now. The tunnel seemed endless. Its walls pulsed faintly with reddish light, veins of molten rock winding like arteries beneath the stone. The deeper Kael and Ceres went, the hotter the air became. Every breath felt like inhaling from a furnace, and the distant rumble of the earth grew louder with each step, like the heartbeat of a slumbering god. Kael wiped sweat from his brow. How deep are we? He asked, his voice hoarse. Deep enough that no light from the world above can reach us, Ceres replied quietly. This is where the earth remembers its beginning, the place where the first fire was born. The words sent a shiver down Kael's spine. You mean this tunnel leads to the river's heart? Ceres nodded. If the river truly burns again, its source lies somewhere beyond these caverns. But beware, many who sought it never returned. The fire guards its secrets well. They reached a vast chamber, where the walls widened into an underground cathedral of stone. The ceiling arched high above them, glowing faintly orange from the light of molten streams that trickled down like fiery tears. The floor was uneven, split by cracks that oozed lava. Kael stood in awe. It's beautiful, he whispered. Ceres gave a small, sad smile. Beauty and death are close kin, Kael. Remember that. As they crossed the cavern, Kael's eyes caught something carved into the rock, a massive mural etched deep into the stone. It showed figures standing before a great river of fire, their hands raised as if sealing something beneath it. Beneath the figures, ancient runes glowed faintly. Kael stepped closer. What is this? Ceres ran her fingers along the carvings. This is the story of the Firebound. Long ago, before your village or mine existed, the gods raged across the world. When they tore the sky apart, their power spilled into the earth and became the river. Those who survived its birth, humans and fire spirits alike, joined forces to bind it. The ones who succeeded were called the Firebound. They gave their lives to seal the river away. Kael studied the glowing runes. And you think I'm descended from them? I don't think, Ceres said softly. I know. The mark on your arm. He looked down. Beneath the grime and sweat, faint golden lines pulsed across his forearm, the same pattern Ceres bore on her skin. I thought it was just a scar.
It's no scar, she said.
It's a seal. The blood of the Firebound flows in you. The river calls to its kin. Kael felt dizzy. Then, if I carry their blood, does that mean I can stop it? Ceres's gaze darkened. Perhaps. Or perhaps it means you will awaken it fully. Before he could reply, a tremor shook the cavern. Pebbles rained from above, and cracks split the mural. The molten streams on the walls flared brighter, roaring as if angered by their discovery. Ceres grabbed Kael's hand. We must move now. They sprinted across the chamber just as the ground burst open behind them, spewing fire and ash. The tremors grew into violent quakes, and from the fissure emerged another creature, larger than the sentinel they'd faced before. This one was a serpent of pure flame, its eyes twin coals of hatred. It slithered across the molten floor, its body hissing as it moved, setting the very air ablaze. Kael stumbled backward. What is that thing? The guardian of the cavern, Ceres shouted. It defends the river's heart. "We can't fight it, not here." The serpent lunged, its jaws snapping shut where Kael had stood a moment earlier. He rolled aside, the heat searing his clothes. Saris drew her blade again, striking at the creature's side. Her sword met its fiery skin with a blinding flash, but the serpent barely flinched. It roared, the sound like thunder trapped underground. "Run!" she cried. They darted toward a narrow passage at the far end of the chamber. Kael could feel the creature's heat on his back, hear its hiss growing louder. Just as it lunged again, Saris turned, slashing her blade through the air. A barrier of blue fire erupted behind them, sealing the tunnel entrance. The serpent struck the barrier, sending a shockwave through the rock. The barrier held, but cracks spidered through it. Saris winced, clutching her chest as if the pain were her own. Kael grabbed her arm. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," she said through gritted teeth. "The barrier won't last. We have to move before it breaks." They pushed deeper into the tunnel, the air growing even hotter and the walls glowing brighter with each step. The path sloped downward until it opened into a cavern unlike any they had seen before. The ground was smooth obsidian, reflecting the fiery ceiling above. In the center lay a pool, not of lava, but of liquid light, swirling with gold, crimson, and deep amber. The air shimmered with heat and power. "The river of fire," Saris whispered, falling to one knee. "We've reached its heart." Kael stepped forward, awestruck. The river wasn't burning, it was alive. The light rippled like a heartbeat, and faint whispers echoed from its depths. He couldn't make out the words, but they sounded familiar, ancient, almost like a song he'd known his entire life but had forgotten. "Do you hear that?" he asked. Saris nodded slowly. "The voices of the firebound. Their souls are bound within the river's flow, eternally guarding it." Kael knelt beside the pool. As he reached out, the liquid fire moved toward him, rippling like it recognized him. A single droplet lifted from the surface and hovered above his palm. It didn't burn. Instead, it pulsed softly with warmth, gentle, almost comforting. Saris's eyes widened. "It knows you. The river accepts you." Suddenly, the droplet sank into his skin, and Kael gasped. Images flooded his mind, visions of a great battle beneath a crimson sky, gods made of flame and stone, rivers of molten light carving through the land. He saw the firebound chanting, their hands raised as they sealed the raging current within the earth. And among them, a figure with eyes like his own. When the vision ended, Kael stumbled back, breathing hard. "I saw them, the firebound. They used their power to lock the river away. But something broke the seal." Saris frowned. "What did?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but I saw a shadow, dark, alive, tearing through their ranks. It wasn't human." Before she could respond, a crack thundered through the chamber. The barrier behind them shattered with an explosion of light. The serpent's roar echoed through the tunnels again, closer now. Saris drew her sword. "It's coming." Kael looked back at the river. "If the river knows me, maybe I can use it." "Don't," Saris shouted. "You can't control that power. It will consume you." But Kael was already stepping forward. The river flared as he approached, the whispers growing louder, more urgent. He stretched out his hand, and the light surged upward, spiraling around him like a storm. Fire danced across his arms, glowing the same golden hue as Saris's veins. For a moment, he felt everything, the heat, the life, the heartbeat of the world. It was like touching the soul of creation itself. Then, just as quickly, the fire withdrew, leaving him trembling but alive. The serpent burst into the chamber, its eyes blazing with fury. But when it saw Kael surrounded by that faint golden light, it stopped. It hissed, shrinking back slightly. Saris stared in disbelief. "It fears you." Kael clenched his fists, his voice steady for the first time since they'd begun the journey.
"No."
"It fears what's inside me." The serpent recoiled, snarling, then slithered back into the tunnels, vanishing in a swirl of flame. The ground trembled once more, But this time, it felt less like rage and more like a warning. Saris approached cautiously. Kael, what did you do? He looked down at his hands, still faintly glowing. I don't know, but I think the river showed me something. The seal wasn't just broken, it was stolen. Someone took the river's heart. Saris's eyes darkened. Then the fire will never stop spreading until it's returned. Kael nodded, his expression hardening. Then we find whoever took it. From deep within the cavern, a faint echo rose, a voice neither of them recognized, whispering words that chilled Kael's blood. The heart burns bright in the hands of the one who betrayed the flame. Kael looked at Saris, determination flaring in his eyes. Then our journey isn't over. It's just begun. And as they turned toward the tunnels beyond the river's heart, the light behind them pulsed once, like a living thing watching them go. The path beyond the river's heart was narrower, colder, an unsettling change after the burning caverns they'd crossed. The light dimmed as they moved, the molten veins in the stone fading to dull embers. The air still trembled faintly, alive with distant energy, but a strange stillness hung over the passage, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Kael walked beside Saris, his skin still faintly glowing from the river's touch. The light pulsing from his veins had begun to fade, but the warmth remained, alive beneath his flesh like a memory that refused to leave. He couldn't stop thinking about the voice that had whispered in the cavern, the one that spoke of betrayal. The heart burns bright in the hands of the one who betrayed the flame. Those words echoed inside his skull, haunting and cold. Finally, he broke the silence. Who could it be? Who would steal the river's heart? Saris's expression was grim. Long ago, when the firebound sealed the river, one among them turned against the others. He sought to use its power to remake the world. But when he was defeated, his spirit was cursed to wander, trapped between fire and flesh. Kael frowned. A traitor among the firebound? She nodded. His name was Vareth. In my time, he was a legend, a warning whispered to keep our kind obedient. But if the river's heart is missing, then Vareth's curse may have found a way to break. Kael's stomach twisted. You mean he's alive? Not alive, Saris said. But not dead either. He's something in between. The tunnel widened again, leading them into a new cavern, this one dark and lifeless. The floor was covered in black ash, and jagged stone pillars rose from the ground like the teeth of some enormous beast. A cold wind blew through cracks in the walls, carrying a low, eerie hum. Kael stopped walking. Do you hear that? Saris listened. Yes, voices. The hum grew louder, resolving into faint whispers. Shapes began to move in the shadows, tall, thin silhouettes that shimmered like smoke. One by one, they emerged from the darkness, ghostly figures clad in cracked armor, their eyes glowing with dull embers. The firebound, Saris breathed. Their spirits remained trapped here. Kael took a cautious step forward. Maybe they can help us. One of the figures turned its hollow gaze toward him. Its voice was soft, like wind over dying coals. Blood of the firebound. You walk the cursed path. Why? Kael steadied himself. The river is rising again. The seal is broken. We need to find its heart before it destroys everything. The ghost's expression flickered with pain. The heart stolen by the betrayer, taken to the city of stone and silence. Kael glanced at Saris. What city? The city beyond the flame, she murmured. Valcor, the ruins of the firebound stronghold. It was buried when the river was sealed. If it still exists, the ghost's ember eyes dimmed. He waits there in the shadows of what he once ruled. Beware, descendant. The fire that binds you also burns for him. Before Kael could ask more, the ghosts began to fade, their forms dissolving like smoke in the cold air. The last one lingered a moment longer, whispering faintly, "The path will demand a sacrifice." Then the cavern fell silent once more. Kael exhaled slowly. A sacrifice. What does that mean? Saris looked at him, her golden eyes full of unease. The firebound believed that power must always be balanced. To restore the river's heart, something, or someone, must be given in return. Kael frowned. We'll find another way. Saris didn't answer. They followed the path deeper until the air began to change again. The faint glow returned, but this time it wasn't from fire. It was from crystals embedded in the walls, pulsing softly like trapped stars. The ground beneath their feet turned smooth, polished by time. Then, suddenly, the tunnel opened into an immense chamber. Kael stopped dead in his tracks. Before them lay a city, an entire city, buried beneath the earth. Towers of obsidian rose from the cavern floor, their edges glowing faintly red. Bridges of blackened stone stretched across rivers of molten rock. Ancient sigils flickered across walls and statues, each one humming faintly with residual power. Valcor, Saris whispered. The city of the firebound. Kael's voice was barely a breath. It's still standing. Barely, she said, but enough for what waits here. As they descended into the ruins, Kael could feel the heat returning, stronger now, pressing against his skin. The river's pulse was close again, beating beneath the ground. The streets were silent, but faint trails of glowing footprints marked the dust, fresh ones. We're not alone, Kael muttered. No, Saris said softly, drawing her blade. He knows we're coming. They followed the tracks through the winding streets until they reached the center of the city, a vast courtyard surrounded by crumbling statues. In the middle stood a blackened altar carved from volcanic stone. Upon it rested a sphere of blazing light, pulsing slowly, like a living heart. The river's heart, Saris breathed. Kael stepped closer, awe and dread mingling inside him. The light was mesmerizing, radiant with the same warmth he'd felt from the river itself. But beneath that warmth was something else, something sharp, like the edge of a blade. A voice echoed through the courtyard, deep and resonant. You should not have come, child of ash. Kael turned sharply. A figure emerged from the shadows behind the altar, tall, draped in torn robes of black and red. His skin glowed faintly beneath the fabric, veins of molten gold running up his arms. But his eyes burned with darkness, like coals that swallowed all light. Saris's breath caught. Vareth. The betrayer smiled faintly. Ah, so one of the fire's daughters survives. How poetic. Saris raised her blade. You were supposed to be dead. I was, Vareth said calmly, until the seal broke. Until he awakened it. He turned his gaze on Kael, and the world seemed to shudder under his stare. You carry their blood. You opened the path. You freed me. Kael's heart pounded. I didn't mean to. But you did, Vareth interrupted. The river's power flows through you now, as it once flowed through me. And that power belongs to me. Saris stepped between them, her sword gleaming with blue flame. You'll have to kill him first. Vareth laughed softly. You think I can't? You forget, Saris. I was the one who gave your people their fire. He raised his hand, and the air around him ignited. The ground split open, spewing molten streams. The very city seemed to awaken at his command. Kael stumbled back as the heat became unbearable. Saris. She lunged, her blade meeting Vareth's burning arm. The clash of light and fire blinded Kael for a moment. Sparks and embers rained through the air as they fought, each strike shaking the ruins. Vareth moved with terrifying grace, every blow powerful enough to send shockwaves through the stone. Run, Kael, Saris shouted. Find the heart. Kael hesitated, then turned toward the altar. The sphere of light pulsed faster now, reacting to his presence. He reached out, and the moment his fingers brushed its surface, pain seared through his body. The world vanished in a flash of gold. He saw visions, memories that weren't his. Vareth standing before the river, the firebound trying to stop him, Saris's people burning as their flames were turned against them. And then he saw something else. Vareth stealing the river's heart, binding it to himself. When Kael's vision cleared, he was kneeling beside the altar. The heart was glowing brightly, but now he understood. It wasn't just energy. It was alive. Vareth's voice boomed across the courtyard. You cannot wield what you do not understand. Kael looked up, his hands trembling. Maybe not, but I don't need to wield it. He slammed his palms against the altar. The heart pulsed violently, and the ground exploded with light. Fire roared up around them, swallowing the courtyard in golden flame. Vareth screamed, his form wavering as the light consumed him.
Fool.
You'll destroy us all. Kael shouted over the roar. Then we burned together. But Saris grabbed him, pulling him back from the altar. Not yet. You can't stop him this way, you'll die. The fire surged higher, swallowing Vareth's figure completely. When the light finally faded, only silence remained. The altar was cracked, the heart dimmed, and the betrayer was gone. Kael collapsed to his knees, shaking. Is it over? Saris looked at the altar, her expression unreadable.
No. He's not dead.
He's bound again, but not for long. The river's heart is still incomplete. Kael stared at her, his pulse still racing. Then where do we go now? She turned toward the far end of the city, where a faint red glow flickered beyond the ruins. There's one last place, the Forge of Souls. That's where the final piece lies. If we fail there, the world burns. Kael stood slowly, the fire in his veins flaring once more. He nodded. Then we don't fail. And together, beneath the trembling earth and the watchful flame, they began the final descent. The descent into the heart of Mount Vareth was nothing like Kael had imagined. He thought they'd enter a cave, a tunnel, maybe even a lava-filled chasm. But as Saris led him through the narrow, crumbling passageways, the light ahead grew brighter. Not with fire, but with something far stranger. When they stepped out into the cavern beyond, Kael's breath caught in his throat. Before them stretched an entire city, built of black stone and glowing glass, suspended above a sea of molten fire. Towers leaned at impossible angles, connected by bridges that shimmered with red veins of energy. The air pulsed with a rhythm that was almost alive. Everywhere, molten rivers snaked between the buildings, glowing like veins of a living creature. The city beneath the flame, Saris murmured, her voice trembling. This was once the capital of the Firebound, before the river consumed them. Kael took a step forward, his boots crunching on cracked obsidian. They built a city on top of fire? They didn't build on it, Saris replied grimly. They built with it. The Firebound believed the river was divine. They channeled its energy, shaped it, worshipped it. But when they tried to control it, the river rose and burned them all. Kael's gaze swept over the silent streets. Skeletons of towers glowed faintly in the heat, and the faint sound of whispers echoed through the hollow wind. So, everyone here, they're gone?
Gone, she said.
Or worse. A low groan rolled through the city, like thunder. Kael froze. The sound wasn't from the mountain. It came from beneath their feet. The molten river stirred. At first, he thought it was just the flow of magma shifting. But then, shapes began to form, tall, glowing silhouettes rising from the fire. Human-like figures, their bodies made of molten stone, their faces featureless and cracked. Their eyes burned white-hot. The Firebound, Saris whispered. They were cursed to guard the river for eternity. The molten sentinels began to move, slowly at first, then faster, pulling themselves out of the molten pools, each footstep hissing and hardening the rock beneath them. Saris drew her twin blades, both glowing faintly with etched runes. Stay close. Don't let them touch you. Their fire burns the soul. Kael drew the shard of the river heart, clutching it tightly. The crystal pulsed in his hand, as if sensing danger. The first Firebound charged, its molten hands reaching out. Saris met it head-on, her blades slicing through its chest in a burst of sparks. It shrieked, the sound like cracking glass, and crumbled into glowing fragments. Another took its place immediately. Kael backed away, his heart pounding. More shapes emerged, 5, 10, 20, surrounding them in a tightening circle. Kael, Saris shouted. Use the shard. Focus on it. It answers to your blood. He lifted the shard, his hand trembling. The light inside it blazed brighter, humming with energy. He closed his eyes, feeling the heat build inside him, the same fire that had haunted his dreams. The ground shuddered. The air trembled. And then, from the shard, a wave of pure white flame burst outward. The firebound screamed as the wave tore through them, their molten forms melting into nothing. The white fire raced across the city, lighting up every bridge and tower, filling the cavern with blinding light. When it finally dimmed, silence fell. Only the molten rivers continued their endless flow, calmer now, almost peaceful. Kael gasped for air, his hands shaking. I didn't know I could do that. Saris lowered her blades, staring at him with a mixture of awe and fear. You shouldn't have been able to. That flame, it's the pure fire. The original power of the river's heart. No mortal can wield it without being consumed. But I'm still here, Kael said, his chest rising and falling rapidly. She nodded slowly. Because you're not just mortal. You truly are what I feared, the heir of the fireblood. Kael frowned. You said my ancestors sealed the river. How could I have its blood? Saris looked away. Because the one who sealed it was the river's own child. A being born of both fire and man. You carry their legacy, Kael. And that means the river calls to you not as prey, but as kin. The revelation hit him like a blow. The fire in his veins, the visions, the whispers, it all made sense now. He wasn't just chosen. He was bound to it. Before he could speak, a deep rumble shook the cavern again. Cracks split the stone beneath their feet. From the center of the molten sea, a massive column of flame erupted, spiraling toward the ceiling. Saris grabbed Kael's arm. It's waking. The river's core, a voice, ancient and thunderous, echoed through the cavern. You carry my heart. Child of ash, return it, or all shall burn. Kael fell to his knees, clutching his head as the voice roared inside his skull. Images flooded his mind, mountains splitting, villages burning, oceans boiling into steam. He saw himself standing at the center of it all, the world crumbling in fire around him. No, he gasped. I won't be you. I won't destroy everything. The voice laughed, low and cruel. You already have. Saris knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders. Kael, fight it. Don't let it in. I can't, he gasped, his eyes glowing with the same molten light as the river. The shard in his hand pulsed wildly, its light turning blood red. Saris reached for it, but the moment she touched it, flames burst around them both. The air screamed. The city beneath the flame began to crumble, towers collapsing into the molten sea. Kael, she shouted over the roar. If you let the river take you, the world dies. You must master it or we all burn. Kael's mind was a storm of fire and agony. The voice inside him grew louder, deeper. He could feel the river's heart beating in sync with his own. He raised the shard high, and for the briefest moment, the fire obeyed him. A dome of white flame erupted around them, shielding them from the collapsing city. Kael screamed, his voice mingling with the river's roar. And then, silence. When Saris opened her eyes, the city was gone. They stood on a vast plain of blackened glass. Above them, Mount Vareth's ceiling had split open, revealing a sky swirling with red and gold. Kael stood in the center, his eyes still faintly glowing. He looked at Saris, his voice hoarse. It spoke to me. It wants me to come to its source, to the heart of the river. Saris nodded solemnly. Then that's where we must go. She looked toward the distant glow of the horizon, where the river flowed like a scar through the world. But Kael, if you fail, it won't just be Eldara that burns. It'll be everything. Kael clenched his fists, the shard flickering in his hand. Then I can't fail. And as they began their climb out of the shattered city, the first drops of ash began to fall, soft as snow, but hot as tears. The morning that followed was like no morning Kael had ever seen. The sky was the color of molten gold, streaked with threads of crimson smoke that shimmered and pulsed as if alive. The air trembled, carrying a heat that seeped into their bones, and the ground itself seemed to hum beneath their feet. Kael and Saris had climbed through the ruined caverns of the mountain until the world opened into a vast plain of blackened stone. Ahead, cutting across the horizon, flowed the river of fire, no longer just a ribbon of molten flame, but a raging torrent that twisted like a living serpent. It screamed and hissed as it flowed, its waves rising high into the air before crashing down in bursts of light and heat. Kael stood at its edge, the shard of the river heart clutched tightly in his hand. Its glow pulsed in rhythm with the fiery current, as though both shared a heartbeat. He could feel the river's whisper inside his mind again, soft now, almost gentle, like a mother's voice. "You are close, my child, come to me." Saris stepped beside him, her face shadowed by the fiery light. "The source lies beyond the firefall," she said, pointing toward the horizon where the river plunged into a massive chasm. "That's where it begins, and where it ends. But it's also where the fire dreams." Kael turned to her, confused. "Dreams? The river isn't alive in the way we are," she said softly. "It dreams the world into being. Every spark of fire, every light in the heavens, it's part of its eternal vision. But something corrupted those dreams long ago. The nightmares took shape, and the fire began to hunger instead of create." Kael stared at the swirling inferno ahead. "And I'm supposed to stop that?" Saris met his eyes. "You're supposed to wake it." They began their journey along the riverbank, the heat growing more unbearable with every step. The air shimmered like a curtain of glass, distorting everything beyond. Strange figures appeared and vanished within the haze, shadows of those who had once come seeking the river and never returned. Once, Kael thought he saw his mother standing among them. Her figure flickered in the flames, her voice soft as the wind. "Kael, you were never meant to walk this path alone." He blinked and she was gone. "Don't look back," Saris warned, gripping his arm. "The river shows you what you most long for. It's how it tests your will." They pressed on. Hours, or perhaps days, passed as they moved closer to the firefall. Time had lost its meaning here. There was no night, no day, only the endless glow of the burning sky. At last, they reached the edge of the firefall, a towering curtain of flame cascading down into an abyss that seemed to have no end. The roar was deafening, and the light blinding. Kael could feel the shard vibrating in his hand, its light burning brighter than ever.
"This is it," Saris said.
"Beyond this lies the source." Kael looked into the abyss, his heart pounding. "And what happens when I reach it?" She hesitated. "That depends on what you choose. If you merge with it, the river will become whole again, but you might lose yourself. If you destroy it, the river dies and the world's fire dies with it. So either I burn the world or I freeze it." Saris gave a sorrowful nod. The balance of fire and life has always demanded sacrifice. Kael looked down at the shard, its heat searing into his palm. "Then let it be mine." Before she could stop him, he stepped forward and leapt into the firefall. The world dissolved into flame. He fell through light and fire and memory, through every dream he'd ever had, every fear he'd ever known. He saw Eldara burning, his friends screaming, the mountains crumbling to ash. Then the visions shifted. He saw his ancestors, warriors of light and flame, standing before a river that stretched into eternity. At their center was a figure of pure fire, with eyes that blazed like suns. The river. It spoke, not in words, but in the language of heat and light. "Why do you resist me, child of flame? You are mine. You were born of my breath." Kael floated in the void of fire, the shard glowing fiercely in his hand. "If I'm yours, why do you destroy everything I love?" "Because all things must burn to be reborn. Fire is the end and the beginning." Kael shook his head.
"No."
"Fire doesn't have to destroy. It can warm. It can give light. It can protect." The river's form shifted, its massive shape coiling around him like a serpent of light. "You speak of weakness." "I speak of choice," Kael said. "You dream of a world of endless fire, but what if the dream could change?" The river's roar filled the void. The flames around him surged higher, wrapping around his body like chains. Pain shot through him, but he didn't let go of the shard. "If fire dreams," Kael shouted, his voice echoing through the inferno, "then let it dream something new." The shard exploded in light. White fire, pure and radiant, burst outward, cutting through the river's form. For a heartbeat, the entire world went still. Then the flames began to change. The raging torrent softened. The red turned to gold. The burning heat became warmth. And for the first time, the river's voice was not thunder, it was a whisper. "You dream of peace." Kael's strength was fading, but he smiled faintly. "Maybe it's time you did too." The fire enveloped him completely. His body burned away, but there was no pain now, only light. He felt himself dissolve into the river, his heartbeat merging with its rhythm. He wasn't fighting it anymore. He was part of it. And for the first time in centuries, the river dreamed, not of destruction, but of life. When Saris looked up from the base of the firefall, she saw it, the blaze turning to gold, then white. The roar softened to a deep hum. The flames curled inward, drawing back into the earth like a great beast falling asleep. "Kael," she whispered, tears cutting paths through the ash on her face. The shard was gone. The river of fire had stilled. And standing at its center, surrounded by a halo of light, was Kael, not burning, not broken, but reborn. His eyes glowed with calm golden fire, his voice soft as the wind. "The river dreams again," he said quietly, "and it remembers us." Saris fell to her knees, awe and sorrow mingling in her heart. "You did it, you saved us." Kael smiled faintly.
No.
"We saved each other." Above them, the sky began to change. The crimson clouds faded to blue. The ash turned to rain. The world breathed again. But deep beneath the earth, in the endless heart of the river, a single ember still glowed, waiting, watching, dreaming. Because fire, no matter how gentle, never truly dies. The first dawn after the river's awakening broke quietly. No roar of flame. No trembling ground. Only the soft hiss of cooling earth and the steady whisper of wind brushing across the plains. For the first time in centuries, the sky over Eldara was clear, blue and vast, painted with streaks of pale gold. Kael stood on the ridge overlooking the valley where the river of fire had once thundered through. Now, it was a great scar of shining glass, its molten fury sealed beneath a thin crust that shimmered faintly like morning dew. Smoke still curled upward in gentle spirals, but the fire was gone, sleeping, not dead. Saris stood beside him, her hair now streaked with silver from the light that had consumed them both. Her eyes, once molten gold, had softened into amber. The transformation of the river had touched her too. "You did it," she said quietly. "You changed its dream." Kael's gaze stayed, fixed on the horizon. "No," he murmured. "We both did. The fire wanted to remember what it once was, and maybe it needed us to remind it." The air was cooler now, carrying the scent of rain instead of ash. In the distance, the first green shoots of life were breaking through the blackened soil. It was subtle, fragile, but it was life. Saris looked at him carefully. "You've changed, Kael. The river's light still burns inside you." He flexed his hand. A faint golden glow traced his veins, fading after a moment. "I can still feel it," he admitted, "like a heartbeat under my skin. It's quiet now, but it's alive. Watching. Waiting." Saris nodded. "That's because you're its keeper now. You've bound its soul to yours. As long as you live, the river sleeps." Kael turned to her, the weight of her words sinking in. "And when I die?" Her expression darkened. "Then the world will tremble again, unless another rises to take your place."
He was silent for a long time.
The breeze picked up, scattering ash like snow. He watched it drift, glittering in the sunlight, beautiful, even in its sadness. "I don't want to be a god," Kael said finally. "I just wanted to save my home." Saris smiled faintly. "That's why the fire chose you. True power never belongs to those who seek it. It answers to those who fear it most." They began walking down into the valley, their boots crunching on glass that shimmered like ice. Around them, the landscape was transforming. The black plains were cracking open, giving birth to streams of water that hissed where they met the still warm stone. The air smelled of steam and life. It was then that they saw movement in the distance. Figures, dozens of them, walking through the mist. Villagers from Eldara. Survivors. Their faces were tired, soot-streaked, but their eyes lit up when they saw Kael and Saris. "Kael," a familiar voice cried. It was Elder Tarn, limping forward, supported by two younger men. The mount had stopped. The fire went silent. What happened? Kael hesitated, glancing at Saris. How could he explain that he had spoken to the river itself? That he had merged with something ancient and infinite? He smiled faintly. The river remembered mercy. The old man blinked in confusion but nodded slowly, tears forming in his eyes. "The gods have blessed you, child." Saris said nothing. She only watched as the villagers knelt and pressed their hands to the cooling ground, whispering prayers to the fire that had once destroyed them. It was no longer a curse, it had become something sacred again. As the people began to rebuild, Kael wandered toward the remnants of the firefall. The abyss had sealed itself, leaving only a faint golden glow deep within. He stared into it, hearing a soft whisper rise from below. "Dream well, my child, for the world now burns by your heart." He closed his eyes and bowed his head. "Then let it burn with light." Saris joined him, her voice softer than the wind. "It's not over, Kael. The river will dream again one day. Maybe not in our lifetime, but when it does, someone will have to remind it what it means to be alive." He looked at her, a knowing smile playing at his lips. Then maybe that someone won't be alone. They stood there for a long time, watching the first true sunrise their world had seen in generations. The sky glowed not with fire, but with hope. The river's heat had become warmth, its rage transformed into quiet strength. But deep beneath the earth, the ember still pulsed, a single spark of eternal flame. And within it, faint and distant, a vision stirred. Kael saw flashes of it in his mind. A distant future, cities built upon the sleeping river, new generations born under skies untouched by ash. But in every vision, the same truth lingered. Fire would always return. It was not evil. It was not good. It was life itself. He placed a hand over his heart, feeling the steady warmth there. "If the river dreams again," he whispered, "I'll be waiting." Sarah smiled. "Then let's make sure it dreams of peace." Together, they turned from the valley and began the long walk back to Eldara. Behind them, the river of fire shimmered faintly in the morning light, its surface reflecting the colors of dawn. The land was quiet, healing, breathing. The journey that had begun in fear had ended in rebirth. And though the world would never forget the river's fire, it would also never forget the boy who taught it how to dream again. The years that followed the awakening of the river were unlike any the world had seen before. The fire that once devoured everything in its path now slept beneath the soil, warming the lands and giving birth to a new age of life. The people of Eldara rebuilt their homes on ground that glowed faintly with golden light. Crops grew where ash once lay. Water ran clear where molten streams had burned. But even in peace, there was change. The river still whispered. Kael could feel it every day, a quiet pulse deep within his chest, the same rhythm as the fire that slept below. It was both comfort and burden, warmth and warning. Sometimes, when the wind blew from the mountains, he heard the faint echo of the river's voice. Not in words, but in feeling. It reminded him that the fire still dreamed, and that he was part of that dream. He had become the keeper of embers. Sarah stayed in Eldara too, though she often traveled across the reborn lands. She had become a protector of the new balance, guiding villages and teaching them to respect the river rather than fear it. The people called her the Flameborn, the last of the firebound who had chosen life over destruction. One evening, years after the awakening, Kael stood on the same ridge where his journey had begun. The valley below was lush and green now, a river of pure water winding through it where the molten torrent had once flowed. The setting sun cast a soft orange glow over everything. Ceres joined him, her cloak fluttering in the wind. "You still come here," she said with a faint smile. "Even after all this time." Kael nodded. "It's quieter now, but the river still speaks to me." "What does it say?" she asked. He hesitated, then said softly, "It dreams of something new. It's not the dream of fire anymore. It's dreaming of balance, of warmth and life existing together." Ceres looked out across the valley. "That's what you gave it, Kael. You showed the fire how to live without destroying." Kael turned to her. "Do you ever think it could wake again? That it might forget?" She sighed. "All dreams fade, even the peaceful ones. But that's why you're here, to remind it when it forgets." Kael smiled faintly. "Then I'll keep reminding it, for as long as I can." For a long while, they stood in silence, watching the last light of the day fade into twilight. Then the ground trembled, softly at first, then stronger. A low hum rose from beneath the earth, familiar yet distant. Kael stiffened. "It's stirring again." Ceres's hand went to her blade. "After all these years?" Kael closed his eyes, feeling the warmth rise beneath his skin.
No.
Not in anger. "It's calling me." Before Ceres could speak, the ground beneath them split open in a flash of golden light. Flames, not red or violent, but soft and shimmering, rose from the crack, spiraling upward into the sky. Kael stepped forward, unafraid, the glow reflecting in his eyes. "It's time," he whispered. "Kael." Ceres reached for him, but he turned to her, his face calm and radiant. "You once told me the river dreams the world into being," he said. "But dreams can't last forever unless someone tends the flame. It's calling for its keeper." Tears filled her eyes. "If you go, will you come back?" Kael smiled gently. "You can't return from becoming what you already are." Before she could stop him, he stepped into the golden flame. It wrapped around him like sunlight, lifting him from the ground. His body dissolved into light, his spirit merging with the fire. Ceres shielded her eyes as the light expanded, rising high into the heavens. When it faded, the sky shimmered with thousands of tiny sparks, drifting downward like glowing embers. Each one landed softly across the valley, sinking into the soil, the water, the trees. And then there was silence. The crack in the earth closed. The glow faded. Kael was gone. But in the days that followed, the people of Eldara began to notice something extraordinary. The fires in their hearths burned warmer, yet gentler. The crops grew faster. The nights were cooler, but filled with a faint, comforting glow. And when the wind blew through the valley, it carried a whisper, soft, steady, and kind. "The fire remembers." Ceres often returned to that ridge, standing where Kael had vanished. She no longer carried her blades. Instead, she bore a small lantern, its flame never dying. The villagers said it burned with the light of the river's heart. She called it Kael's light. Years turned to decades. Ceres grew older, her hair turning white as frost. One evening, she stood again on that ridge, the lantern in her hands. The world around her was peaceful, the sky glowing with the last rays of sunset, the valley alive with green and gold. She smiled softly, her eyes on the horizon. "The fire still dreams," she whispered. "And I'll keep watching until I see you again, keeper of embers." As night fell, the stars shimmered brighter than ever before, each one flickering with a faint, golden glow. They said the river of fire no longer flowed through the earth, it flowed through the sky. And somewhere among those stars, a soft voice whispered through the wind, "Dream well, my children. For fire is not the end, it is the beginning." The river slept, the world healed, and the keeper's flame burned on, eternal, unseen, but forever alive.